So today is the 13th letter from Seneca on Groundless Fears. Essentially, um, anxiety, right? This is like the very first meeting that we did that we recorded was anxiety. This is anxiety again. So did you guys get a chance to go through those letters?
I haven't gotten a chance to. I'm sorry. No, I'm going to try to skim through it right now.
No, you're fine. I'm going to go through it. So that's what was my warning is anybody that didn't go through it, don't worry about it. I'll just go through piece by piece. That's what I did. So he starts out. He says, I know that you've had plenty of spirit even before you began to equip yourself with maxims which were wholesome and potent to overcome obstacles. You were taking pride in your contest with fortune, and this is all the more true now that you have grappled with fortune and tested your powers. For our powers can never inspire in us implicit faith in ourselves except when many difficulties have confronted us on this side and on that, and have occasionally even come to close quarters with us. And I took this as we essentially don't know what we're capable of achieving until we've overcome an obstacle, especially on different fronts. I think a lot of anxiety comes from, at least for me, in not having the experience to tackle something, right? And the new situation that you're not sure exactly how your mettle is going to be applied to it. And with experience comes the displacement of anxiety, right? As you get comfortable with things, you go into different endeavors, you know what to expect, you anticipate, things that you may have to overcome, and you just lose that general anxiety that comes with not knowing what to do. But it's also, I think, and what he talks about here is things that have occasionally even come to close quarters with us. And I think what he's talking about is the things that actually matter, right? The things that you actually should worry about. Because it's my take that the majority of stuff that we end up worrying about never actually comes to fruition, or certainly wasn't nearly as bad as we thought it was. But then every once in a while, there are things that you do need to take heed of. And kind of one of the themes of this entire letter for him is he's saying not that, anxiety is to be shunned entirely, that worry is to be shunned entirely. It's the groundless fears. So fear is, from this letter, this is one of the poignant parts that I took, is to understand that fear is in our nature, that fear is something that is going to happen no matter whether you want it to or not, or you have mechanisms in place or training to try to keep yourself, away from it, that it's going to happen. But you have to pay attention between what's groundless and what's not, right?
Right.
So that was my take on it. So what do you guys think about that kind of opening piece that he's talking about?
Yeah, my first thought is it goes to how do we distinguish between the groundless fears and the ones that are the ones we're supposed to pay attention to.
I think about it in my analogy of life being a river, and we're on that river, and the troubles ahead that we worry about, they come in two forms. One, the ones we can't see that are around the bend, and we know they're there. They know they're upcoming. We may not know the exact precise timing of it, but we know there's boulders in the river. There's a waterfall coming up, but again, we don't know it's there. So we start to anticipate beforehand and start to do work mentally, at least, to prepare for that. And as a approaching savant of efficiency, I'll call myself, because everything I do with the purpose of doing it as efficiently as possible. My first argument is that's not an efficient use of your time, right? If you're spending all that time preparing for something that's not actually affecting the effort that you put into it, what's the point of it? So the troubles you can't see around the bend, there's no point in preparing for it. But as soon as you see that rock in front of you, as soon as you see that waterfall, and it's there, it's apparent that you need to start preparing for it, that's when you take action, right? And that's kind of the discernment between understanding when your actions and efforts can actually affect an event versus when they're not going to do anything but put you in a vicious cycle of rumination action, kind of a thing. Hey, Ian,
Right.
nice to see you.
Hello.
Hey, so we're just going through the first paragraph of Seneca's letter here.
Fantastic. Sorry, I'm late. I
I
had
know
a
you're.
fight.
So here's the kind of so what I did this week actually is I went through each one of these and kind of wrote out and just regurgitated my thoughts on each one. And here's the thought that I had on this specific one. You didn't know how to ride a bike, and then you did. And all the fear that you had about riding that bike began to disappear slowly, not immediately, but over time as you got better at riding that bike, doing all sorts of tricks and hopping curves and then, doing the crazy stuff. But you'll never know the full strength of your entire constitution if you have been confronted on multiple fronts. In the military, they train to support multiple wars. How the logistics of spreading troops and resources will be able to accomplish the mission of defending the United States and our interest around the world. In the same way, if you do not believe that you are capable of thriving when your rent is overdue, your mother's in the hospital, your dog is dying, you have payments to be paid and you don't have the money to pay them, you're never going to know what it's like to actually be happy, because you have to understand that when you're not fighting, but when you have different obstacles in front of you, right? And I want to talk about obstacles and how obstacles are viewed and perceived. But when you have multiple obstacles going on at the same time and it feels like your world's crashing in, Stoicism tells you that time is no different than calm to thrive. And they're completely separate. They're not joined at all. And so if you can get into the mindset to know that my thriving comes first, that nothing is going to stop my ability to find happiness and thrive in this life and exist, and they're completely separate from what's going on in the external events around me, and then just take stock of what you're doing. I really like the analogy of how, again, the military confronts obstacles or wars versus how people can do it. And I hear it all the time of like, my world's crashing down around me. I can't do this. I can't survive. What am I going to do? And it's like, they have nothing to do with each other. Those are just obstacles and obligations that you have to confront, So that's my first thought in his first paragraph. Oh, actually, we're not even through the first paragraph, because then he keeps on going to say, it is only in this way that true spirit can be tested, the spirit that will never consent to come under the jurisdiction of things external to ourselves. And this is everything that you have complete control over. And then it's whether you find something in your control to be an obstacle or an impediment. And this is what I was talking about. People that see things that happen externally as impediments, I think they're looking at it the wrong way. It's not an impediment that's stopping you. It's just something that you have to overcome. And I look at obstacles like real opportunities for growth, because you don't look at it like it's something you have to overcome in the sense of, I'm going to have to do extraordinary things to get over this. It's really just a matter of taking the work day by day to do them. And I see obligations as nothing more than an opportunity to kind of set up, really, like I said earlier, a learning environment to gain experience about myself, about the external world, right? I look at most obstacles and I break them down into steps. Recently I had this idea that I have, if you guys ever seen the show, what was it? It was a Stephen King novel about a town that has like a giant bubble placed over top of them.
Under the Dome, I think it's called.
Yeah, that was it. And I was talking to somebody recently and they were talking about eating an elephant spoon by spoon, right? And how everybody knows that analogy. And it's one of those things that like you can look at and break down and understand the adage of it. But what happens when you've got something to eat inside of you that's the size of a dome? So I was talking to my son this week. We were talking about putting Jell-O on stuff. And I go, what if that dome was Jell-O? And somebody said, you can save your city if you eat all of that Jell-O, right? And it's just like the elephant. The first step is you have to take your first bite. So no matter the size of the obstacle in front of you, it's always about taking the first step and then the second step and the second step. And those steps are what's in your power and control. So why would you even worry about getting to 5, 6, 7, and 8 if you haven't taken one? And then you worry about 2, and you worry about 3. So when I talk about overcoming obstacles, that's the process that I'm in. Is just as simple as taking one step and one action to do it, and then keep going until it's over. And through that process, know that there's going to be a lot of experience gained. There's going to be a lot of things you find out about yourself and your mettle. And it's nothing more than an opportunity to grow and get better. It's not an impediment that like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so hard to get over. The hard and the difficulty that people talk about a lot of times is just showing up. It's the consistency of showing up and doing the work and taking action. People get paralyzed by fear because they will be overcome with different options that they should act or how they should act. Don't worry about the different ways to do it. Just do something. Nature is going to correct your actions if they're wrong, right? I've always had the thought, if I have an obstacle and I go at it and I start attacking it, and then I find out that my effort is all for naught, and this is not going to actually achieve, overcoming this obstacle, I'm going to find out pretty quickly that I have to correct my course and go about it. And there's no, to me, that there was always, I would just say there's no point in me being upset about me having to waste that time now. That's not always the case. And I still get upset about that. But my God, 10, 15 years ago, when I would see an obstacle and realize, oh my God, I just spent a day on this thing and I have to start back and go again. And it would devastate me. Now I go, okay, take stock of what happened. You realize what happened. Let's approach it again. The world's not lost. You can still thrive and be happy. So I think that understanding the difference between an impediment and an obstacle, and it's really just your mindset, right? Because no matter whether you call it an impediment or an obstacle, it's something that's in front of you that is prohibiting you from going forward in a way that you don't have any effort, right? Just going about your normal day without putting any effort, something would happen. But an obstacle is something it's an obligation that is going to create a situation for you to put those options in. So, anybody have any other thoughts on the obstacle impediment type thing he's talking about?
Eric, I wrote my whole thing, so I'm waiting to hear you tell me your week and I can tell you mine. Because I wrote it. I went and I did the homework.
Guys, look, I'll be honest with you. I'll stop right now and tell you that I did not only the homework, but I did the practical application of this, of quitting my job this week. Groundless Fears in my own life has been something that I felt has held me back from really going after my own happiness and wanting what I want. I got to tell you, meeting people like, you, Doc, and what you're doing down there. And I've told you before that, my wife and I are on this path to go abroad. And I've had these unfounded fears of what's going to happen when I quit my job and we don't have guaranteed money and we don't have this and that. And I finally, in the last week and a half, have taken stock of those. He goes, what fears of things that are impediments that I need to deal with now and what are around the corner that I can't deal with? And I got to a head pretty quickly this week and I go, enough's enough, act. I quit my job. So I'm off and running, and I'm in the midst of this, and it's honestly, I really delved into this week because this is something that was absolutely applicable to my life, and I realized that I can't sit here and talk with credibility about this if I'm not living it, So, Gabe, to answer your question, that's been my week this week.
Amazing.
Yeah. So we're still not through the first thing. So the last thing I'll say is he then says that an acceptance of and submission to the idea that we cannot control fate and the nature of things is only able after you have tested your powers by encouraging difficult situations and realizing you cannot control anything other than powers inherent in you, reasoned logic, and choice of mindset. And I put my note here is I wasn't resilient to obstacles and to have the confidence that I do now, the mindset that I can endure any situation that may come. If I hadn't failed or experienced unsettling situations in the past, if I hadn't failed the bar exam the first time, I wouldn't know the work that had to go in to pass it the second time. If I hadn't been super duper fat, I wouldn't know what my relationship with food was supposed to be. If I hadn't failed in so many other different endeavors, I wouldn't have learned the lessons of what nature intends a result to be based on the effort that I put into it, kind of a thing. And I realized that every frustration that I had with outcomes that I had expectations over is because that one, I thought that I could input or influence the event enough to change it. Take that out of the equation. That takes care of 80% of unfounded fears, right? Now you're left with the tranquility of, hey, it's up to you to make the change. And then you look inward. And that's when you realize that now, every time I see somebody that's angry, like really frustrated, the first thing is like, you're probably angry at yourself. And that's exactly where I was, and realizing that once you've identified things that you can't control, now you've got to do things to actually do them. You can't just think about them. You actually have to take steps and take action. And I was a habitual planner to the point that it was hurting me because I would plan so much that it would inhibit me from actually taking the action because it would create all additional fears. I would say, okay, if you dreamline something where you say, here's my ultimate dream, now I just take steps back to see how I can get there, I would realize all of those impediments that I saw along the way were going to be a lot of action that I was going to have to take. And I was afraid of just the effort, of putting in the effort. But then once I'm in the moment, I go, well, shit, I feel good. This isn't a ton of work that I have to do. It's not going to ruin my day, kind of a thing. And just take it bit by bit. So that's why I read that first paragraph that he talks about. And I think, honestly, as I went through the rest of the letter, there's a couple more things that he talks about, but it's really that idea that you just need to change your mindset. And I talk a lot about later on about how really kind of funny it is. And it's really almost like I remember I used to look at this idea of changing your mindset and being happy in the face of things that may not happy as like a mental deficiency. Like something's wrong with you. You're crazy. If you can just pick up and say, my mom's dying, this is happening, but I'm going to choose to be happy. I'm just going to put a smile on my face you're going to be, that's to me is crazy. Like you have to reflect what the situation is in front of you. But I got a friend of mine who served in the Navy. His name's Kenny Bigby. He's a SEAL. And he had a podcast recently where he was talking about the vagus response. And it's the idea that not the idea, but it's the physiological concept that your muscles in your body respond to movements and mindset by releasing dopamine to essentially create a simulated happiness, right? So he has this podcast where he says, like, if you're sad and you slope your shoulders, you put a sad face, you're going to be sad. But if you get up and dance around and smile and then tell yourself that you're sad, it's impossible because you're removing, your body thinks that you're happy. And that's kind of what Stoicism tells you. It's been hard for me to reconcile that idea of like, you just make yourself happy. That's it. You just tell yourself, I'm happy, go be happy. But that's it at its core. That's what Stoicism is. That kind of why we simulate discomfort to get achievement, right? As humans in 2023, by running on treadmills, by taking cold showers, by meditating, by calming our minds. Those are things that we're doing to simulate a perception of our environment and our reality. So why can't you do that for happiness? Why can't you just say, I'm happy, and then go be happy? And that's a lot of what he talks about here is, first of all, once you understand that you can't control it, then just change your mindset to, if you've got something else hanging out there, don't worry about it, put it off and be happy right now. And you can do that. And that's been my week, man. It's been crazy to sit there and think like, I got all this stuff hanging over my head. I have a laundry list of to-do list stuff to do. I have a bank account that's never been lower right now. And I looked at all those things and I was like, but I can still be happy, right? I can still choose to be happy. And I can not only choose to be happy, but I can thrive right now. And like this week that I had a little bit of time off from work obligations, like I created a ton of materials for my next endeavor. And I was realizing that even in the face of these obstacles that I have hanging out there, I chose to be happy. And that created this environment for me to thrive where I wasn't worried about the other stuff. I was just worried about being happy. And then I went out and I got a tattoo on my arm this week and it says check objective, which is my number one thing. Always check your objective and what you're doing. And right now my happiness or my objective is to be happy, right? So I just tell myself, go be happy and be happy. The next one says ego is the enemy. And then the obstacle is the way. It's stolen pretty much from Brian Holiday, but I justified it because of general Stoic tenets. So yeah, I could sit here and go through this entire letter, but I want to hear you guys talk about your experience with this and what you're doing to kind of get in this mindset of understanding that you can thrive and you are thriving. It's just how you change your mindset.
Do you guys want to go, or do you want me to
Sure.
tell you give you my Stoic cheat sheet of the week? I don't know.
Sure, I'll go. I'll
Please-
go.
please do.
So I had two thoughts about what you just said. The first one, what shifted for me drastically about the idea of the obstacle being the way was the thought process of, if I look at all of the times in my life where I was like, this sucks. I can't believe this obstacle's come in the way. Like this challenge. I didn't get this job. I just got broken up with. Whatever, all these different things that happen. And then I pulled back a far enough lens on the event. I was like, oh, thank God that happened because it led to this. Right. And it's like, if you zoom out far enough, over time, you usually go, oh, I'm glad that negative thing happened in some way, shape, or form. It made me stronger because of this. It got me better eating habits. It got me, I got out of that toxic relationship that I didn't realize it was toxic, or maybe it wasn't toxic. I found a better person. All of those things of being like, oh, if I zoom out far enough, I'm glad the negative thing happened. And so the shift in my brain went from going, well, instead of waiting, 24 months to have that realization, what if I just try and have that realization right away? Which is that, oh, this negative thing happened. I know eventually I'll go, I'm glad that negative thing happened because it will lead to a better thing. But what if I could circumvent that, like the frustration? I mean, within reason, obviously you can't never feel an emotion. That's insane. But like, rather than dwelling in the negativity, to go, eventually I will be glad this happened in some way, shape, or form because it will lead to another thing. What if I can just be that, have that gratitude for the negative now, rather than waiting for a while? I think that's kind of the idea of wisdom, is the accumulation of life experiences to have perspective on things happening, know what's important, what isn't. And if I could just force the wisdom now of going, oh, this doesn't matter because in the long run, this negative will end up being a positive. That was a big mindset shift for me, which boosted my mood tremendously whenever anything negative would happen. And by boosted my mood, I mean, it just prevented the sort of like deep dive, or at least staying there for any extended period of time, because it was always like, oh, this will eventually be for the benefit. And since I've adopted that, that has been consistently true. And I never had to go into the negative place to begin with. The second one about that, the point of choosing to be happy that way. I've thought a lot about this. I heard someone point out that the very, like, someone saying you can't fake being courageous in a time when, like, being courageous involves an action, because the very nature of the actions of being courageous is the courageous thing. So for instance, you can go, oh, I'm gonna, like, I have to pretend I'm not scared and be courageous to run into this burning building to save someone. The act of running into the building is that is courageous. You're not faking it. To do the act itself is being courageous. And so that same thing can easily apply to being happy and sadness. It's like, oh, being okay with this negative thing happens. I can sort of be like, oh, I'll force myself to smile and dance because I know it helps, but it's like the very act of doing the thing often is the thing. So that resonates with me pretty directly in that sense, because if I go, okay, well, I can sort of force myself to be happy. Well, if you're doing the things of being happy when other aspects of your life are lining up to make you probably not feel happy, but by doing the thing of being happy, aspects of self-care, taking care of yourself, getting things done, completing things on a checklist, checking in on loved ones, going to work, going to the gym, all those things like that you would do when you're doing well. Doing that is how you get through the negative stuff, because you kind of can't fake courage. Doing it anyway is the right thing. It is the courageous act. So that's sort of my thoughts on those.
Yeah, the part that you said about the when something negative happens, like that idea that something happens that we see as negative or positive, right? And when we take a step back, just like you said, and you reframe it and you get a higher perspective on it, that's when you start to realize that what happened was an act. Something happened. It's how we look at it that we start to apply the labels of negative or positive based on how it affects us. And I had a meditation this week from Holiday's thing that talked about this same concept, that when something happens, you can later look and say, oh, I found benefit of it. But what if you shift your mindset and say, this isn't happening to me? This doesn't involve me at all. Something's happening bigger than me. And it's what I take away from it. An event that happens is nothing more than an opportunity, right? Unless it's, happening in a way that ends your life, like something that happens to somebody else, or something that creates an obligation or creates an expectation of action on your part, is just an event. Something happened. Nature created and prescribed that event was going to happen based on all the actions that came before it, right? And all the different decisions and butterfly effect type shit that got to that point in time. So once it happens, the event happens. Nothing about that event says it's negative or positive, right? I don't care if it's the space shuttle blowing up, or I don't care if it's a flower blooming in spring. It's just an event that happened. It didn't affect you. That's how you look at it. So if you're from a mindset to go, that happened, that's it, I'm going to describe what happened, and now it's, what do I do with it? And that, I think, is where you really have the power of saying, is this a negative or a positive, or is it just an event? And now I can take stock of, where does that event create an opportunity for me to be even more better, to thrive more? And if it doesn't, then you don't worry about it, right? If it's something that you perceive to be negative in line with your path, then why can't you just forget about it? Right? If it's something that creates an obligation, then put it at the forefront of your to-do list and go do it. Right? So I think too many people take stock of something happened and it being negative or positive, rather than just seeing it for what it is. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Somebody's not being a dick. They just took their car and moved it in a certain way that drove it. It just so happens that you happen to be there, kind of a thing. Right? So when you really detach and look at events objectively, I think that's when you start to see that there's no negative or positive. It's just your response to it. And that power within that moment of time, right after it happens, you have the ability to say, this was positive or negative. And then your entire, basis for how you respond is premised on that mindset and how you accept or deny that impression. Right.
Yeah, I think as soon as you're like, this just is an event that happened, it's neutral, I get to decide if it's positive or negative, that means every event could be positive. And you are in complete control of whether that's the case. And that is like there's truly no more powerful way to go through life than to be able to like feel like you're manipulating the world around you to be positive whenever you want it to be.
Yeah,
It's like
that's what it is. And I had a kid in high school that was like this, that he was positive all the time. Like he didn't play any sports, but he hung around all the athletes. And if we would lose, he'd find us out the next day, but like, don't worry about it. It's awesome. We're going to learn from it. I'm like, dude, your positivity is like overwhelmingly annoying. Like the life is not like this all the time. It's not that good. And granted, we're 80s kids growing up in the 90s, so life was kind of that good in America, but still, like he had that always positive. Like, I don't know if it came from his home life or where he got it from, but every single thing he did, Eric Berman, think about this kid so often, like he was positive in every single way. And I remember when I was in high school, like this kid's crazy. There's something off this kid's rocker. But now I'm like, man, that dude, like he had the medicine that I should have been taking, right? Because why not? If you can choose happiness, why not? That kid was happy all the time. Now, I don't know, as I saw him, obviously, I don't know if he was stoic and that was just really a facade and he would go home and cry himself to sleep or not. But just that idea that, you know, if you have the choice to be positive. I remember like losing like hockey games and like, and I played hockey in Florida. So like the school didn't know about it. It was club hockey that you'd have to read the newspaper about, right? And he would come and find me out and be like, Eric, saw you guys lost 5-4. Like, first of all, why are you paying attention to my game? And you're like, you know, you're going to do better next time, right? And I'm like, bro, like that mindset is insane to me that you would seek somebody out to try to instill positivity in them when, you know, a teenager's life is crumbling around them because they lost the game. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's that moment that you get to choose. And it's magical if you can, you know, restrain that power and use it to your benefit. Totally agree. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about that I don't know. I seriously, I have 9 pages of my notes here. I'm a little crazy this week because I had a little bit more time. But oh, where did it go? Okay. So in the 5th one, he says that some things will torment us other than they ought. And this is what you just talked about, Ian. You can't deny all emotions, but some torment us before they ought. Some torment us when they ought not to torment us at all. We are in the habit of exaggerating or imagining or anticipating sorrow. And my note was things will torment us, but some things do it more than they ought to. If you lose your job, if you're going to feel some torment, but don't let it torment you past the time limit that you are able to apply logic, to find a path back to a form to apply your professional efforts. So it's, again, I have this analogy that anytime a negative emotion hits you, you just have to get it off you as soon as possible so you can get back to logic. And the same thing with this, I think, is like any negative emotion, just like you said, Ian, like you can't deny emotions. They're going to happen. Fears are going to come. Anxiety is going to come. That's just a human existence in 2023. But it's your job to dispel that as soon as possible, to recognize it, be aware of it, and get it the fuck off you and say, okay, I'm going to apply logic now. Let's get rid of my, you know, emotional right side brain. Let's apply nothing but logic to the situation so I can understand clearly what's going on. Now, I say that I also want to preface it by saying that, you know, don't dispel all emotions. You need to be aware of them, understand, to have compassion and empathy. But at the same time, you have to recognize that any decision you make to act, to have the courage, has to be devoid of emotions. You have to be thinking clearly. You have to be detached from the situations, right? But I love this passage because it's not saying that if you're approaching things stoically, you're not shunning emotions. You're not shunning the torment. You're not saying it's never going to reach me. It's saying when it gets here, I'm going to let it torment me the appropriate amount that it needs to torment me. And that's the idea that I have of don't start paddling faster before you see the rock. But when you see the rock, motherfucker, you better paddle, because if you don't take action, you could get injured. Nobody wants needlessly injured. You don't fall on grenades when nobody else is around. But if you have an opportunity and you've identified places that you can do something with that torment to change your life, well, then yes, you have to act. You have to have the courage to act. But I love the idea that it's not, you know, so many people think that Stoicism is just about shunning all emotions and being completely emotionless. That's not at all. If anything, it's having a very intimate relationship with your emotions and knowing them better than probably other people don't. And to say, look, I know you're coming. I know you're here. You're going to go away now because I know you can't help me in this situation. Or you can help me, right? If you're tormented, for me, I was tormented at my job only because I didn't feel like that it was in line with my purpose. It was a means to an end to make money, to let me try to pursue other identities. And I realized if I'm going to sit here as a credible Stoic, I have to, everything that I do has to be in line with my purpose. And working a job to just make money is not in line with my purpose. And that torment every day of going to work and being like, I'm not looking forward to this work. I don't want to do this work. And I listened to that torment for a year. And it got to me here and say, okay, this is still tormenting you. Like, you need to do something about it. And I've done something about it now. But it's that idea that, you know, and we talked about before, like when frustration or anger hits you, yeah, you have to recognize it. You have to see what's going on, because there's always going to be a lesson there, right? So, so I guess let me ask you guys, when it comes to, you know, what level of emotion, negative emotion, torment that he talks about. I love he says torment versus negative emotion, because we identified, you know, it's how you see it. But what level do you think is appropriate before you got to go, okay, take a step away, like I need a break? Or what do you guys do when you kind of get in those vicious circles of rumination? I guess, or what steps do you have to get out of it? Because I know in the past, I 4 years ago, I lost my job. Our company was getting sold, and for like 6 weeks, I just spun my wheels, going, I don't know what to do. Like, I have no idea how to act. I'm scared for the future. And then luckily, I got a cold call out of the blue that somebody said, hey, I need a job, go do it. But I remember thinking, like, damn, why did I waste all that time like not doing that? Now I know that I would have the mechanism in place, the journaling every day, the meditation, things like that. But I think back to that time in my life 4 years ago where I let it happen, and I don't know when it would have stopped. So what do you guys anything going on now that you can't stop thinking about, that you're losing sleep over, or anything in the past that you recognize, like, hey, this was something that I did that stopped that rumination, stopped that vicious circle of me thinking about something and understanding that the torment that I was experiencing wasn't equal to the level that I should have been?
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts. I mean, one is, it's funny, I am kind of going through a thing right now. I went through a breakup recently, and I've been sort of working through that in different ways, and using that as an opportunity of exercising the ability, like we've been talking about, to practice pulling yourself out of it, you know, and really starting each day and realizing, okay, this thing is there, and you can give into it, or you can exercise this muscle of directing your attention, directing your mind, which is something that takes a lot of practice, and use this as an opportunity. And I'm somebody that I generally grow more when I have a friction, you know, in front of me. So, and you know, I also, one of the things, I don't know if this is applicable, but like when I work with my clients, you know, part of the work I do as a therapist is making space for pain, you know, making space to go, this thing happened and you have a right to feel upset about it, and let's make some space for it. But generally what I recommend is, you know, that people kind of engage in the process that I'm talking about, which is, you know, never, not putting yourself in a place where you're just kind of giving into this pain and letting it dominate your life, but commit to the task of overcoming it, redirecting your mind. And then when that no longer works, that is the time to let it hit you. Do you know what I mean? What I'm trying to say is, like, there's this kind of build up, and there's this kind of always this voice, maybe you're depressed, maybe you're upset, that wants to kind of give into that. And to the degree that you're able to redirect, continue engaging that activity until it becomes very clear that you're running away from something you really need to face. And then it is about sitting with and letting it, okay, take a day, or take a time and let it wash over you. Honor the fact that this thing is screaming in you and needs attention, but never lose sight of the fact that that is not where we're going to stay. You know, that's not the place that we're going to keep at. And as far as how long, that's always different for each situation and each person. I don't have a good metric for how that's how that's determined as general.
I think that, first of all, I got to go back to what you said, and I love that this idea in what you said in Stoicism, that you have to sit with that and know that this isn't going to be the like permanent place you're at, right? And to me, Stoicism highlights this idea that you have to accept that there is a dichotomy as in your human existence of having reasoned ability is a superpower, but it flies in the face of instinct and realizing that your nature and who you are, you have these powers inherent in you. So it's the acceptance of, yeah, I have this reasoned ability to apply logic to situations, but it's a double-edged sword because you also have instincts that are going to serve you well. So if you accept and submit to your instincts and stop thinking, just like you said, like there's going to come a point in time where you're going to have to act. Your body's going to be like, okay, you got to do something. And I think it goes in line with the temporal consideration of how long do you sit there with, like something's going to change, right? Like your body's going to let you know, your mind is going to let you know when you need to act, you need to feel how you feel about this. And if you, it's almost like the same way you can create happiness, you can create consternation by not listening to your body. And I'm walking myself in circles here, but so to me, it's on the one hand of, yes, you need to be aware of these emotions and understand that you need to work through them, but also your existence is going to have a natural path that's going to take care of this, right? Time is the best healer of things because we start to chip away with how much we hold on to it each day, I think, right? When something happens right away, we hold on to it and we're like, oh my God, this is my existence, this is my identity. But human nature says that that's not going to be your existence every day for most people. Now, certainly are the people that cannot let go of things and that becomes their identity, that trauma becomes who they are. But I think most people every day a little bit falls away because you stop paying attention to it so much. So if you're not stoic, you're not anything, eventually, if you have a child that dies in a young age, 30 years from now, you're not going to be as hurt as you are the Tuesday after it happened. That's natural human progression. Stoicism tells you I can shorten that time much, much sooner, but understand that your innate human abilities and who you are going to process this on their own. But it's taking a step forward and saying, having that foresight to say, I can stop this right now, because if I let my human nature take this without any input from me, it's going to be a long process for me to get through this. It'll eventually get there, but I can speed it up some way that helps me thrive now versus waiting for this. I think when you were younger and you got broken up with, how long did it take you without any input from yourself, without any work? You're better now. You don't miss her the same way or him the same way you do now. So time will heal that. So that's part of what you said of like, hey, this eventually is not the permanent. This too shall pass. But Stoicism says this too shall pass tomorrow if you want it to, right? You can get on moving right now. You don't need this. You don't need it. And if you apply Stoicism and say, what can I control in a situation? What happened? Could I have controlled her actions, his actions? Nope. Move on. All right. Now let's take the lessons learned and what happened. And I can take honest stock and not lie to myself about what I did and how I performed and how I approached the relationship and use those lessons going forward. But any other thought to the past is like, make the choice to say right now, today, I'm thriving now. I'm not thinking about anything going forward. And that's like the speed pass to resolution that I see as Stoicism provides. But so what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say when I think that it's a massive misconception that the idea that Stoicism is not dealing with your emotions. I think there's nothing more dealing with your emotions than the idea of going, I want to deal with this directly right now as powerfully as possible so that I can choose when I want to move on rather than letting it control you. So for me, it has always been, or always, since I've been applying more Stoic principles, I should say, I think one of the most powerful things about Stoicism is it's very difficult to do it naturally. It requires work. That's one of the things that's so powerful about it, is that you start to, you really start to implement it and then iterate on implementing it to get better and better. You see the compound effect. It's like, it's a harder thing to be able to do without having some type of framework or guidance or approach towards it. And so when I started truly implementing those principles, I would deal with I got over negative stuff way quicker because I would just go, I'm going to look at this from every possible angle right now. I think, and so two things. First off, just doing stuff helps rather than doing nothing, right? All right, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go to the grocery store. Just physically doing stuff will always help because you're out in the world and your mind's connected to your body, and your body doing things and checking things off the list will naturally make your mind feel better. But then at the same time going, all right, after I'm done stuff, if I haven't processed this emotion, now start going, let's really think about what's happened. Why am I feeling sad? Picking a breakup. Why did that relationship end? What did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? What did they do wrong? What could they have done differently? What did they do right? What did I like about that? And going I need to feel everything about this right now so that I can get over it in, I don't want to pick a time frame because it's so, but like I can get over it on a time frame that makes more sense to me in terms of a week, a month, a day, depending on what the relationship is or, what's going on, rather than this is going to haunt me for years and cast a shadow over my interactions with other people. And so that's why I think Stoicism is the most powerful way to, it is truly about processing your emotions, because you're going to go, I'm going to think and logically confront this from every possible angle so that I can get over it, and just get done what I need to get done, rather than giving it so much weight by just going, I'm just going to feel the emotion rather than addressing it and looking at it from different angles under a microscope.
Yeah. What if you said, so as far as like the time consideration, how long it takes, I was thinking, you're absolutely right. Everything's subjective. There's no say like, hey, you need to get over a girlfriend in 4 days. You need to get over a lost job in a week.
Right. Yeah.
But I think what I've learned and what I think I do now is you take each moment that you get an opportunity to kind of take stock of like where you're at. My wife and I have this theme that every time we do something that's uncomfortable, whether it's a conversation, an activity, take a step, see how you feel. If you feel comfortable in that uncomfortableness, then take another step. And if you feel that uncomfortable isn't within your nature and you're like, this feels icky, like I don't like it, take a step back. And I think that's how it comes to resiliency, is in getting past something and get over an obstacle that's not necessarily like step, involved, like I talked about, of like, I need to, professional obstacles, like personal obstacles, like losing a romantic relationship. The steps involved are just healing and understanding what happened and then moving forward. But if you identify an obstacle that you said, oh shit, like I could have done this better, like this absolutely was my fault, that I need to get better as a human being for my next relationship. It's just a matter of like waking up and taking a step. And if you feel comfortable that day doing it, you go ahead and do it. And if you're hurt by, and this is kind of a non-stoic principle that I would give advice to anybody, if you feel like you're hurt from somebody, understand you don't need to do anything else and wake up that day, see how you feel and go about your day. And if you feel that you have the energy and effort to put forward to resolving it, then do it. Because you understand that Stoicism doesn't say that you have to prescribe to an idea that you have to get up and do great work every day, that you have to do the work that creates resolve and resolution for you that day. No, you just follow your nature. And I've realized that it's acceptance of people have different natures, people have different motivations and how they do things. I could leave my wife today, and this is honestly a true assessment of my personality. I could get up, walk out the door, go down to the store and say I'm getting a pack of cigarettes and never come home like a 70s dad. And I'd be fine. I would go off and ride in the sunset, and I would miss my son. I'd miss my wife, but I could live my life and be happy. Other people would never be able to do that. But we have different natures, right? And in that nature also creates different ways that you heal and grieve and go through processes. And you should never expect somebody else's time to go through that process to be compared to yours. Stoicism tells you don't compare shit to anybody, including that. So for me to even sit here and say, what do you guys think at the time? If you said 1 week, I would never be able to come back and say, I think that's too long or too short. It really is subjective. But I think the important thing is to pay attention to your nature and how you go about things. And don't put expectations on yourself to say, I'm going to be better in a year. I'm going to be better in 6 months. No, you just have to be the best version of yourself, not the best version of what a book says that you should be or something else. What are you capable of? What energy do you have today to put forth the effort? There are some days when you're going to have, look, I got other job obligations, I got family stuff. I don't have time to sit and think and process this. I don't have the time to actually journal and put the action into it or to talk to a friend. I get that, right? But my theme is always be the best version of yourself that you can be, and understand that your nature is going to direct how things go. And don't ever be upset at your nature. That's who you are, right? You don't try to be somebody you're not. But it's interesting to me that I think of those two different types of obstacles, that, there are some things that you can definitively, look at and go, I need to do X, Y, and Z to get over this. And you look at those X, Y, Z, like, I just don't want to do it, but the obstacle's away, you got to do it. But then those personal obstacles, like you're going through, Ryan, of like, I just broke up with the love of my life. This is my partner. This is my existence. I don't know what my existence is going to look going forward. Like, there's no time for somebody to say like, you're going to be completely healed and ready to get out there in the world and thrive again. It's just a matter of every single day when you wake up, you take stock of where you're at, and that comfortableness and the uncomfortableness goes away, and you're left where you're at. Right.
Yeah. And I think, your tattoo, check your objectives, is applicable, and sometimes the objectives, when it's an external thing or a practical thing, or, there's these objectives of, okay, I have this obstacle and I need to do X, Y, and Z. Like you said, sometimes falls in a line where you know what you need to do, and then you can do what can be done and let go of the rest. And then there's other things like this, like, the breakups, where it's just these waves of emotions that come, and it's not really, it doesn't have a practical sort of, it's not as amenable to practical sort of things. It's just sort of, like you said, checking in the moment. And again, it's when those waves come, it's checking objectives. Okay, what needs to be done now in this moment? Sometimes the thing is, I need to get up, I need to get out, I need to go do exercise, I need to not let this nagging thing that wants to sort of just suck my energy take it. But again, sometimes it is like Ian was saying, turning and facing and sitting with it and dealing with it. And even then, and you can kind of check your objectives in that moment. Is what I'm doing right now working through this, or am I just ruminating? And being able to answer that question can help dictate a little bit what the next steps is.
Yeah, I think what I've done in the past that didn't help me at all, but I've seen benefit for others, is rigidly structuring your day to give you time to do that. So people that are really busy, like I think of the 9-to-5 people that have families and they sit, like, I would take time and say, you have, a half hour, an hour to deal with this issue. The last time I had I had an issue with my mom, and like she couldn't be found anywhere. She was off running the streets. I got a whole crazy mom story, like drug addict, all kinds of issues. And I would set aside half an hour a day to coordinate with my siblings and worry about it. I would take like the first 10 minutes and be like, all right, go through your worst case scenarios. Okay, what can you do about it? What's in your control? What's that? And I went through that process. This was about 6 months ago. And I got to tell you, allowing myself to have that time to go, it's, when I was driving to work in the morning, I like to have that time as like my buffer time to do what I want. It's like free time to think. And I realized like I was using that time to think about her, and I go, stop. You have time set aside. That's later. Right now, your objective is to do you. When I got to work, your objective right now is to work. You're going to do that later. And then when I'm in that moment, you go, hey, motherfucker, this is your objective right now. Sit with it. Do the work, right? And you allow yourself to do that. And I got that idea from my wife, because non-stoically in her side, she did the same thing when she was going through breakups. She would say, I would allow myself an hour each night to drink wine and watch Friends and cry. And I go, I love that idea, because you're setting time aside to have the objective that you have to reach, right? You're actually taking the action to do something, and then you preclude yourself from ever doing it again. And each time, again, check your objective. What are you supposed to be doing right now? And if you don't set that time aside, if you don't plan for that, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because you have to go through that process. That process, I don't think you can let happen naturally, right? The grieving process, that's something you really need to be actively involved in. If you let it just happen on its own without your involvement, I think that's where you're at risk of you becoming a slave to it, and letting it become your identity, because you're not controlling it. You're letting it kind of let it take you whimsically, if that makes sense. But so I want to talk about one of the ideas that he had in here in his letter about, of course I lost it now. Oh, balls. I got to get better about this, to organize my thoughts better. I'll find it. I can't find it. Yeah, this may be a good time for you to jump in here.
Okay. Oh my goodness. All good stuff. So here we go with my Stoic cheat sheet of the week. Letter 13. What better way to start a Stoic discussion on baseless fears, also known as superstition, also known as distilling deliberate misinformation. So let's get right into it, shall we? Eric, this week I'll be taking it easy on everyone by showing compassion to others while I continue to remain extremely strict with myself. But taking a page from my daughter's book, since she believes I always show so much optimism when faced with catastrophe, I must allow for others to nestle their fears nicely into their lives where it doesn't affect me, knowing that others may very well be content resting in whatever mediocrity. So my therapist told me to take my weekends as I wasn't. So I tried it, but felt no need to follow the Gregorian calendar, as it felt more uncomfortable than would be expected for a routine change. So although I knew it was good psychological advice, my calendar needed to be bespoke. So I work every other day, but it's true, I have found that other people will still contact me on my days off because they don't realize I'm not following the same calendar as they are. So it just forced me to make my work days half days, and as I'd had to work the day before on my holiday. So being stoic, we can choose to even balance inauthentic stress. So fake, FAKEAF, stress will make you feel real stress, as your anxiety must go up like when one hyperventilates. But done purposely with deliberate pacing, one can simulate jogging, all while staying in one place. I realize I'm a lot when talking to the general public, hence I like to keep my discussions in closed chambers. Were it not for my awareness being an oxymoron to the juxtaposition in the corner of transparency and good faith. And since that's a mouthful of concept, let me elaborate. Why I'm not talking about the pedo topic so much so as I am stating my experience, because we are the sum of our experiences. Unfortunately, this pedo topic is what makes up my entire childhood, as I was severely, serially, sexually molested by Caucasian men because I grew up in Sudbury, Ontario, where they have the highest number of pedophiles per capita. So no matter one's social economic status, every child living in that city is growing up in a tough neighborhood. So while I can point you back to Eric's childhood, I was not in the foster care system. And in fact, my mom was from the country in Jamaica, a place called Rock River. And my family is definitely the Rockefellers of Rock River, where when coming from a family of animal husbandry, I had horses and ponies. But were it not for Stoicism and the introduction of it in my youth, I may not have fared so well after having been severely, serially, sexually fucked by white men with enough wherewithal left to comprehend. If I don't say something because one's ears are going to be offended, then Stoicism has taken a deep dive into oblivion. Pedophiles are the epitome of liars. And now when they want to come forward, we're saying, you know what, on second thought, you better go back to the den where your lies lay. And that it makes sense for us as a people to say to our kids to use their intuition to know whether or not someone is a pedophile is quite bizarre to hear. So again, I'm not too vain to listen to my offspring, and being stoic, I put forth the notion that these same people who want us to go by intuition would change their minds if they knew that those unrecognized minor attracted people, also known as pedophiles, are fighting for legalized child pornography, irrespective of whether or not we want to acknowledge who or what they are. I am cisgendered because I identify as female, and that's what the doctor said I was at birth. But had I been assigned female at birth, but did not identify as female, but male, then I would be transgendered. These are all concepts in our heads that cannot be challenged by the general public, but a psychiatrist could give greater insight because they have previously taken notes and logged it in a manner which makes it easy for the general public to understand. But all this would be impossible without first observing and learning everything from the horse's mouth. So let's giddy up. For who are we to say that we don't want to hear that pedophilia is a sexual orientation, where when our Canadian judicial system, after hearing all the evidence, convicted a white man named Philip Smith to 18 months for sexually molesting my child for the 3 counts he was charged with. And all of a sudden, our Canadian government is interested in hearing what a convicted pedophile has to say. So much so that they'll put them up in a hotel suite type jail where they're hooked up to monitors at a hospital to uncover how pedophiles think. So technically, we need to hear from the horse's mouth. The irony here is that my Greek mythology professor at Laurentian University would always tell me that Philip meant a lover of horses, and he just that he was probably interested in that, but couldn't get a hold of one. And as that was never funny to me, and yet another sexual orientation I contest, I'll stop there before I further digress. So back to baseless fears and the very penalizing part of jail, that is the term meant to torment said pedophile, which had all of a sudden disappeared without even serving a partial sentencing. That would mean before entering said jail. We'd upgraded a pedophile to sit to hear him to better understand how he identifies. Suffice to say it, you heard it here first from an equestrian mound. But if I'm going to be forced to give up my kingdom for a horse, a pedophile's foreplay is that they're not allowed to play, and it's thrilling to them to go up against the possibility of incarceration, as it is a risk they are willing to take because of the baseless fears that abound in their victims. In the same way that gay bathhouses have a lot of clients who want to go bareback, specifically with those tested positive with HIV, as they claim it to be thrilling. So said to emphasize that sexual orientations can drive us to accept delusion. So when a female has a baby before transitioning into a male and now wants society to recognize how he now identifies and would like us to further extend our understanding to include reframing breastfeeding by renaming the act to chest feeding. This, therefore, is not a superstition that many have jumped upon, but a delusion. Because if we don't question the act of renaming breastfeeding as deliberately distilling misinformation of our human anatomy, as it is impossible to chest feed where there are no mammary, we're not thinking inside the box we were packaged in, but we are no longer thinking outside the box either when we apply wings to our backs and now want to be world renowned as flying monkeys. Listen, we're not in Kansas anymore. And as far as cisgendered women, our breasts are atop our chest. Last seen pre-puberty. The point being, nipping it in the bud. For it, we start calling things by what they aren't. Although a very interesting philosophy in helping people to understand where and when they can by expressly stating where and when they cannot. But when blindfolded and touching an elephant, it begins to look a lot like the makings of a superstitious creature, where only massive amounts of booze and cocaine could convince us to see the validity in this reasoning, as these substances will alter our sergeant major, our brains. But that's not Stoic in nature, right? So there are many men who will pay to lay down with women who are intravenous drug users when they are not themselves positive. And when I say they, I mean the men are not positive prior to laying down with an obvious contraction, if that's the expression, where women will never contract HIV by seeking out to pay to sleep with someone who is a known injection drug user, because we are in general a more responsible creature as we are tasked with populating the earth. And I state this stat only because 80 to 85% of women contract HIV from having sex with men who'd already tested positive. So when I say that only cisgendered women can
yeah,
vote
that's no problem.
on laws made to further punish
it probably works out
pedophilia,
best
it
because,
is completely based off the stats, not sexism, but statistical data, as we already know.
yeah, that's no problem. I
Biased
can
figure,
cancel the
but
car, and
figures
it probably
never
works out
lie.
best
And
because
pedophiles are 98.6%
I didn't
male
hear back from my lawyer
identified
yet, so
at
I'm not even
birth.
sure if I can get my
Hence,
car now.
it's just a numbers game, guys, nothing personal. So as a Stoic, and to once again paraphrase Seneca from this very letter 13, being a Pollyanna, I'm happy to say I can neither change at my core nor slow down when I come for pedophiles. So their seatbelts must be fastened, as I'll always remain a smiling assassin. So be happy before the crisis, people. And if it weren't so early, I'd drink to that. But seeing that we are already so enlightened, here's one final question to leave with the Stoic mind for absorption this week. Does it matter that we already accept that in parts of Asia, shocking spoiler alert, where some of the world's last taboos exist, as they have well-documented history from well before the Song dynasty? And so when they'd collected, and still do collect, young prepubescent boys' urine to boil eggs in, we come to see we're once again upon a delicate topic, believed to be a delicacy. So it's clear to see that we are an understanding people with complex superstitions, as those eggs are worth twice the price of a regular water-boiled one, even with sea salt seasoning. So we are in due course for some common sense reasoning, as this goes way past public interest, who are quoted to explode. And as a silver medalist in the 100-meter sprint in both the Masters provincial and national games, I'll just go on record saying that water is my favorite beverage, as it is the drink of champions. Hence, I come here with ledger in hand. So thank you, Eric. As always, it's anything but bland.
Thank you, Gay. I have a lot of thoughts about what you just said, but in keeping with the groundless fears thing and what we're talking about here, one of the things that came up as you were talking was this idea that he talked about of the acute injury that we suffer, right? And taking stock of exactly what happens. And I had this idea that I wrote down on my notes this week of when I was an athlete, when I was younger, I played hockey, I would get tripped and I would lay on the ice and take stock of your hurt. And I wouldn't be hurt. I would just be embarrassed that I fell down into the ice, and I'd lay there until somebody came out. And they would say, "Hey, are you hurt?" And I'd say, "Oh, my ankle hurts," whatever, like soccer players when they get tripped, right? And they fake and feign the injury. And he talks about in here that you really have to take stock of the injury and whether it's something that is actually harming you right then and there, or you're over exaggerating it. And he goes in this kind of diatribe about what over exaggerating it and how it's really a lie. And I thought about when I was a kid that I was lying to myself, to my coaches, to everybody in the stands that I was hurt because I was feigning an injury because I knew I'd fucked up, right? I'd fallen or whatever. And same thing in soccer, like the idea that if what you're doing is in line with your purpose and you're lying to other people, if you're lying to other people, can you still be in line with your purpose? And I would say absolutely so, as long as you're not lying to yourself. So a soccer player that feigns an injury on a pitch because he gets tripped, he's lying to you. He's lying to me. He's lying to the ref. He's lying to his coaches, lying to his parents, lying to his dog that he's hurt, right? But he's not lying to himself, because he knows that when he feigned that injury, it may give him an opportunity, sometimes more than not, for his team to get ahead in the game. And if his purpose is to win a soccer game, that's okay. For him to lie, to try to take advantage of that opportunity, I would argue that's absolutely stoic, right? But it's the idea of, if you do something purposefully and you can justify the action, then you're well within your bounds of what you're doing, no matter what other people see you, what's going on. But you can't lie to yourself. And what I was talking about earlier of it being in your nature and it's who you are, I have the next tattoo I'm going to get is "Don't lie to yourself and think bigger," which are my two personal mantras that I've had since before Stoicism. And it's the idea that I always lied to fit in. Like I became my second nature. Pathological lying was the way I existed throughout my life, and didn't stop till I got in my 30s and had a kid and realized what the fuck's the point of it. But in that thinking, I think we lie to ourselves a lot. Our obligations, you say, "Hey, I should go to the gym," and then it's time to go to the gym and you justify it. Is that justifying, or is that lying to yourself as to why you shouldn't? You should go. You absolutely should go. You should do this. You have to do this. You're not going. That's a lie to yourself. If you're in the middle of, dealing with a traumatic situation and you say, "Am I really hurt?" If you say, "Yes, I'm hurt," you're lying to yourself. You're not hurt. You're making yourself hurt. If you say, "Am I happy right now?" "No, I'm not happy." Stoicism tells you you're lying to yourself, because you can make yourself happy. You have that power. So don't lie to yourself and you'll be fine, right? And if you're not lying to yourself, you're never going to be at risk of exaggerating things. You're never going to be at risk of feigning an injury when it's not there. You're never going to be at risk of being something that you shouldn't be. You're not going to be sad when you should be happy all the time, because you're going to ask yourself, can I be happy right now? The answer is always going to be yes. Stoicism tells you that if you ask yourself at any point in your time, at any second for the next 50 years of your life, and you say, can I be happy right now? The answer is always going to be yes, right? Think about that. No matter what you're doing, check your objective and say, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And can I be happy doing it? 100% you can. And that's what Stoicism tells you, right? You can not only thrive in times of multiple obstacles and huge obstacles, but you can thrive and be happy while doing it. So I think that's what I'm going to leave everybody with today, unless you have any other thoughts about stuff. But yeah, those are my thoughts. You guys got anything else?
Nothing super particular. It was great hopping on to be able to be a part of this. I hadn't I'd seen it for a while and just never really had the chance to hop on, so I'm glad I was able to actually do it.
Yeah, now that I have more time, this is going to be kind of more of a focused study for me. So I want to have a little bit more of a better format to these groups and growing, obviously. But I've also changed. So I started these weekly, hour-long kind of sessions too, and I now theme them. So like different sessions have like fitness for Stoicism. So we'll just talk about fitness and weight loss, personal relationships, professional relationships, personal stuff. So yeah, if you guys are interested in those, come on during the week. I'll be there. Otherwise, I'll be here next week.
And
right.
Eric, I wanted to tell you that congratulations, because that's exactly what Stoicism is. It's a way of thinking. So when you theme them, you allow people, if they don't understand Stoicism too much, that, oh, I can use it in this area, but if you can use it in every area in the same way that the Bible says, or the religious people say you can use their Bible in every way, but it's not a way of thinking as Stoicism is. So it's like more direct plug in to who you are. It's so personal. It's so basic.
Yeah, it's super personal. I realized I picked out each one of those. Like, I think tomorrow is like physical fitness and weight loss. Tuesday is business, like professional endeavors. Wednesday is finding your purpose. Thursday is interpersonal romantic relationships. And then Friday is kind of a lunch open discussion. And I did those because those are things, each of those topics, like Stoicism has helped me immensely. Like, not even immensely, like it's made me thrive in my life. And I have a lot of experience that I can give to people to say, whatever you think you're facing, let me give you an experience of how I went through it. Right. So I'm really hoping that I can help some people in those facets that can hopefully drive them to the bigger draw of Stoicism, because it's like you can acutely help yourself in certain situations applying Stoicism. And that's my thought of this whole new endeavor that I'm going to go on, is I want to start this consulting company where I can go to people and say, hey, I can help you solve your professional problems by applying Stoicism mixed with my experience as a lawyer and a soldier and all the other jobs I've had. But acutely, it's got a lot of benefit for people. But my goal is to bring them in generally and understand that if you apply Stoic principles to your professional, your personal life, everything about you, you're going to find happiness. So my hope is that it'll draw.
Necessary. It's like I told you, I think I told you that my therapist had said, oh, you say you're Stoic. Like, how do you, like, after she starts taking notes on what I'm saying, she's going, oh, and how do you become Stoic? And I'm thinking, I might need to send you to Eric. Like, you know, well, I don't want her in this group with me while I'm Stoicizing on my, it's like, for me, it's how a religion, because it was introduced me almost the same time as religion was. So who wouldn't go for Stoicism as a kid before religion? Come on.
My therapist, I got a new therapist like 6 months ago, and he's like, dude, all the stuff that you're saying like makes a lot of sense. I'm like, because we're in CBT therapy and it's based on Stoicism. And he was like, oh shit. And he realized immediately that it's the basis. It's not influenced by, it is the basis for CBT therapy, which is the most popular therapy around right now. And he's like, dude, you want to work with me? Like, do some seminars? I'm like, absolutely. Like, I'm not in this to make money, man. I'm in this to help people. Like, it's that evangelical side of me is true. Like, I see so much benefit to helping. It's changed my life, and I want to help others. So I'm hoping I can do some good out there. So, all right, guys. Well, I hope you have a great Sunday. Hope you guys see you this week or next week. And if you need anything, advice, anything, you want to yell at me about anything, please reach out. I'd love to talk to each of you guys. Okay.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
You too.
Bye.